Minnesota Vikings select.
He's a longtime NFL draft expert who's been sweating Vikings football since the Randy Moss era.
Straight cash, homie.
Welcome to Thor Talks Purple.
Hello and welcome into Thor Talks Purple. It's a Friday edition today. AJ, the Vikings did not have practice yesterday. They're going to be out there at TCO Performance Center 2:30, getting back at it today, this afternoon, and of course into this weekend and then next week as practices in training camp begin to ramp up. We have some stuff to talk about today, including changes to the offensive system and more of your questions from yesterday. How you doing, AJ?
I'm doing well. I'm doing real well, and I'm looking forward to training camp stuff getting back into the swing. You know, it was a nice day off. We needed a breather. Like there's a lot of football that came at us out of nowhere, but now we're ready for that second wave, and we're just fine. We do have leftover questions that we didn't get to from yesterday's show, like you mentioned. But first, I wanted to ask you about just the new installations from like Frank Smith on offense, because you touched on this 2 days ago, I believe on Wednesday's show, talking about how much pistol you were noticing and then the run game and all that stuff. But we sort of got the sample platter, and I want to get the main course of your thoughts on those new installations and looks on offense. So what is it that you've noticed here? And it's early, but it's enough to where you've noticed it and you have some pretty well-developed thoughts on it.
Yeah, this has been a pretty fascinating subplot of training camp early here. And I think as we get a couple more weeks, I think this is going to get talked about a lot more. And then when you see the Vikings in the preseason games, I don't know how much they're going to show in those, but they're going to have to show some of this stuff, and certainly in joint practices and stuff like that. All this different stuff that they're installing right now. But Frank Smith, the guy that they brought in from the Miami Dolphins to revamp sort of that run scheme, the run scheme that he does, it's a wide zone based scheme primarily out of shotgun. And in 2023, the Dolphins led the NFL in yards per carry. That system is known to lead to explosive runs. The type of explosive runs from the running back position that the Vikings had a complete dearth of last year. And the top two guys are back in the Vikings running back room, but they want to generate more explosive runs. One other way to improved offensive line play certainly will help with that, but also revamping this scheme here. There is some adaptability to that Frank Smith scheme as we saw in recent years. The Dolphins, they became more balanced with gap concepts in 2024 because defenses were adjusting too far to try to take away that wide zone stuff. So they were like, all right, bet. And then Frank Smith dialed it back and again went to some more gap stuff, try to ambush people. And they were still able to grind out an effective running game even when the rest of the Miami Dolphins team sort of began to go wayward here the last couple of years. Just last season, the Dolphins, I think they were 13th in rush yards per game, tied for 4th in the NFL in yards per carry. The two stats where the Vikings last year, I think, was 23rd in rush yards per game. And the Dolphins during that season, 27th in PFF run blocking grade, whereas the Vikings were 14th in run blocking grade. And so, you know, again, just trying to generate some more yards, more explosion with that sort of run scheme. Smith, one of the other things that people sort of talk about with him is he tailors the game plan to the personnel on hand and the opponent that they're facing. So it's sort of these weekly type game plans as opposed to a rigidity with it.
And that's nice to hear too, because I'm not sure the Vikings have a Devon A-chain in their backfield whatsoever. So is that maybe key as well? Because you've mentioned this before, and I don't know if we've hit on this like a lot, but you've noticed, and other people have noticed, that like Jordan Mason looks a little slimmer. Maybe looks like he's got a little more jump. Because we know he can kind of, put his head down and truck through the line at times. But I think that agile, explosive first step portion of his game it has been missing. So do you think that this maybe cut weight or like this new look Jordan Mason is in potential to benefit Frank Smith and what he wants to do?
For sure. I think Jordan Mason is on the precipice of a true breakout season here coming this fall. I think he's a very, very good fit for this system and certainly the best fit for it right now currently on that roster. He has Jordan Mason experience with the wide zone concepts coming from the San Francisco 49ers and Shanahan did some of that stuff. So he's comfortable with it. And then you mentioned like the slimming down, the work he did this offseason. And he's the word I put on it from earlier this week at practice was Jordan Mason looks bursty. get comfortable picking behind the line. He can be patient when he needs to be, but then when he denotes his sort of moment there with the crease in that zone system, punches the gas there. And so he has looked good here recent days in camp. You see a lot of motion in this system, shifting around, and then I've mentioned before trying to get downhill angles on the blocks in that wide zone system. So and then we've seen this melding in of the pistol in practice at Vikings practices. Got the under center stuff. We've seen that, the shotgun stuff, and then the pistol as well. And this is some of the stuff that I wanted to get into just briefly here today about both the subterfuge of some of these new wrinkles that they're putting into this scheme, but also sort of the end goal of all this stuff from a philosophy standpoint, being multiple. In last couple of years in the NFL, you've seen a bit of a shift to see more tight ends on the field, and Kevin O'Connell's mentor, Sean McVay, has been near the forefront of this. And it was kind of fascinating, sort of the genesis of this. You think heavier sets, it becomes more running, but teams have used this not for that, but to manipulate defensive personnel. Because as the history of football, it's you bring out more tight ends, then the defense has to bring out their bigger defenders, right? Taking off some defensive backs off the field, putting linebackers on the field or big safeties, and then offense is using that instead to pass, right? Against that sort of defensive personnel grouping. So they've sort of inverted it and used defensive tendencies against the defense. And I found a recent quote by Wes Phillips when he was talking about some of these adjustments to this offensive scheme that we're going to see, some of this diversification, how he sort of spoke to that. This was in a story this morning by Kevin Seifert at ESPN.com. Wes Phillips said, quote, "We have been mixing in some shotgun, some pistol, like a lot of teams are doing, and for different reasons. Certain defenses have gun checks, under center checks." And then this is what I found interesting by Wes Phillips. Does pistol put them into a gun check, or do they treat that as an under center? It just presents some different looks and different angles for the defenses as long as we can master it. But it's been fun to change up a little bit to some under center, some gun, some different ways of running the football from under the gun. It's been a lot of fun this camp. But that sentence there about what is the defense going to do when you go into pistol in the middle of the game? Is it going to, again, the kind of formation looks that they give for shotgun, or is it going to be closer to under center? Or are they going to have prep for it beforehand? The Vikings haven't had it on film before, right? And so I think some of this stuff of the camera, the no filming and stuff like this, I think some of it is the Vikings don't want that offensive scheme getting out there as well. I do think they're going a bit far with it, but I do think that that's a part of it as well, because in the same way that offenses were using the extra tight ends to manipulate defensive personnel, I think the Vikings are intending with some of this formation stuff. I think we can get defenses where we want them by sort of manipulating their tendencies against some of these different formations. It's a way to be multiple and a way, again, to try to attempt to manipulate the defense, put them into a bad spot, and try to generate some more explosive plays here.
While you were finishing up that thought, I just pulled up the schedule because I was like, I'm pretty sure they play the Packers week 1, and they do, and then week 2 they play the Bears. If they're trying to get this pistol formation installed and kind of catch teams by surprise where they don't have the film on it, just so the offense maybe looks and flows a little bit differently, and they can string together even an extra drive or two that maybe they get in the end zone for. That's going to go a long way this season because you have 2 very important divisional games right off the bat, to where if you middle of the season, sure, it's going to be on film. You're going to have the all 22 and teams are going to be able to break it down like no problem, looking at that, breaking out what they want to do schematically. But the Packers might not see it coming. So like, I don't want to say, hey, I understand that they do not film. You can't even bring a Polaroid camera in here. I don't want to see any single deal. If you're not talking on like a toy telephone, but at the same time, they're trying to win football games. That's the thing. They do want to cater to the fans a little bit, but this could see a little bit of like the surprise factor, especially week 1, potentially week 2, where the Packers just aren't ready for whatever the Vikings are lining up under, under center or in shotgun or whatever it is. But this is interesting. I'm excited to see more today, and I'm excited to see into next week. And I know, will you be out there again this weekend?
I don't think this weekend. Next week
Okay.
I'll be back out there. Yeah, I was
Okay.
out there 2 days this past week, and we'll be back out next week. But and then night practices, joint practices. There's specific dates that I'm going there as well. But
Yeah.
that's the thing that I'm going to be kind of keeping an eye on with some of this stuff. How are they? Because you see tenets of the traditional Kevin O'Connell offense when you're out there, and then you also see these wrinkles, right? And it's like they're sort of baking up something here, and it's like you're looking at the ingredients and you see like the disparate ingredients on the different 11 on 11 plays, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh, you're like the Leo DiCaprio gif, you're like, pointing at the screen, you're like,
Whoop,
that's
here we go.
interesting. Yeah, exactly. I remember that. I remember Devin Achane running this thing a couple years ago, but then now all of a sudden they're back in okay, that looks more like 2024 Vikings,
Right.
like kind of and then it's back to something like this. All this different motion they try to do with some of this new stuff out of the pistols, some of this different stuff, and then the misdirection, and then again giving a run look, coming back with a play action pass, a similar look, and then passing off of it. You've seen a lot of interesting type stuff like that. We've been talking about Max Bredesen on this show on Purple Daily, the day 3 fullback that the Vikings drafted from Michigan. That Frank Smith offense, Alec Ingold, the fullback that they had in Miami, he averaged around 400 snaps a season over a 4-year sample that he had in that system. If you go to the aforementioned Kyle Shanahan offense with the 49ers, Kyle Juszczyk averaged around 600 snaps over 5 seasons. If you think about then the Kevin O'Connell offense and how they've used fullbacks traditionally, CJ Ham was a little under 200 snaps a season under Kevin O'Connell. So in that way, we've been talking a lot, AJ, the rookie defenders, right?
Yep.
Caleb Banks and Big Citrus and Galladay and Demings is the talk of camp, and that's very exciting. Max Bredesen, though, he could be on the field, I think, a lot more than people are anticipating. And how far does this offense, how far did they sort of skew towards what Miami was doing or something similar to the 49ers type scheme with some of that different stuff? We'll have to see, but I do expect Max Bredesen to potentially be out there more than even CJ Ham was here in recent years as the Vikings shift in to this new sort of what I believe is going to be more like a hybrid thing than traditional O'Connell and or totally the Mike McDaniel, Frank Smith thing with the Dolphins.
Yeah.
I think we're going to get a mesh of it.
Well, you almost need to, right? If you're Kevin O'Connell, because we're watching this QB battle. And I know this was a big part that I think was on this show, Purple Daily, and a lot of others last season, which is you're simply not catering the offense well enough to your, at the time, 22-year-old starting quarterback who is making, it's not his rookie season, but his first starting season in the NFL. You're not catering it enough to him. Now it's potentially him. It's potentially Kyler Murray, who you've touched on, and the fit there. Traditionally, he's not the prototype for a Kevin O'Connell quarterback in that offense. So you're going to have some sort of a hybrid where Kevin O'Connell is going to get his just desserts and stick to his standard, food pyramid and food group that he likes. But you're going to have to go to the supermarket. And you're going to have to get some organic whatever and mix in some of this stuff because you have to cater to the quarterbacks that you have to have that offense running on, like a well-oiled machine. They're just not built normally for what Kevin O'Connell wants to do.
Yeah, that's right. And first to the scheme alterations thing from last year, obviously was a bit frustrating that the same kind of lengths that the Vikings seem to be going this offseason to build an offense. I believe that this is all being done for Kyler Murray. And the lengths that they're going here, that some of that stuff wasn't done for McCarthy last year to try to put him into a better situation. But that's sort of the past here. And now we get into they're doing this for Kyler. And I at least will give the coaching staff credit. First of all, it does appear that they're going to be adapting and building an offense around the quarterback. So you have to give them credit for that. At least it's sort of happening now. And the thought behind it, you think about that Dolphins offense and the way it was run here last couple of years, they had really good receivers as well, right? And when Tyreek Hill was healthy, and him and Waddle and this different stuff, and there was Tua, their quarterback, had arm strength limitations, obviously, and you had a lot of this stuff off of some of these different run concepts with the play action or the RPO, and then it would be really quick hitting stuff to those speedsters and try to hit them on the hands, leading them into space, and then that's where you saw all the cool running after the catch stuff with those guys. The O'Connell traditional offense, we've had the deeper drops with more of the downfield shots to the boundary receivers, and I'm wondering here, are we going to get a closer meld with that as well to that Mike McDaniel, Frank Smith offense with the Dolphins, where you have some of those quicker hitting, shorter type concepts potentially for Jefferson or Addison here. Addison had one of the lower slant rates last year, and certainly scant screen opportunities and stuff like that. I had mentioned on a different show that Matt Harmon, who runs Reception Perception, had Jordan Addison with the second lowest slant rate per snap of a boundary receiver in the NFL during his charting period, which is like over the last 8 years. Those were heavy staples of the Miami Dolphins offense. So you have sort of these two, they're not disparate schemes, but obviously different. And then putting them together, we've talked about it with the run game, but then also how is that going to work for the passing game? But I think that the Dolphins sort of schema with that is a better fit for Kyler Murray's game presently than certainly the under center play action, 7-step drop. And now we're going downfield 3 seconds after the snap. That's the stuff that Kyler hasn't been as good at in his career. But some of this other different stuff I think could work really well if they will go sort of that adaptation route with the passing game as well. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to be keeping an eye on here. But it's been pretty fascinating to watch in practices the implementation of some of this early stuff.
You mentioned at the top of the show, we have a few extra leftover mailbag questions from yesterday. But before we get to those, I want you to tell everybody about your friends at North American Banking Company.
Yeah, shout out North American Banking Company. North American Banking Company was founded right here in Minnesota. It's where you get home field advantage from the big banks. Because NABC offers everything that the big banks do, but with a local personalized touch that makes all the difference. NABC is available to talk person to person to learn about your business, your situation, and your goals before recommending solutions. Loan decisions are made here locally by real people who are invested in your success. If you need help with your business banking needs, check them out at nabankco.com. That's nabankco.com. North American Banking Company, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
First one comes to us from Ryan G, who says, question for Thor on some undrafted backup offensive linemen. How are Delby Lemieux and Tristan Lee looking so far in training camp?
Early on, so I was getting eyes specifically on Tristan Lee on what day was it? Tuesday. Was moving around. I even thought I saw him take a couple snaps, but it was I was so far away. It was they were doing some of the shotgun snap stuff. It's so far away that I shouldn't put that like officially because sometimes it was hard to see the number.
Put an asterisk by it. Like you saw him.
They've been getting the work. For sure.
Yeah.
But as far as like how some of these offensive linemen doing, we've only had 2 padded practices so far. And like after the first one, they weren't going full bore in that first one. And then they took a day off from the pads. And then we saw the second one later in the week on Wednesday, where that was a longer, the longest, most intense to this point practice so far of camp. But that's going to be the norm kind of going forward. And we haven't seen as much of in the trenches, like the War Daddy, Hog Molly, knocking the heads together type stuff yet, right? Like we got to get these guys in a phone booth with their pads on more often before we can start to sort of parse together who's struggling, who is succeeding. So let's put a pin in that, get a couple weeks in here, and we'll get back to you on the report of some of those younger offensive linemen.
Kyle Alexander says, why do we keep calling KOC the QB whisperer? If that were true, wouldn't he be able to whisper to any quarterback, no matter their level of experience? Sounds more like KOC, the veteran-only QB guy. Whisperer is a little too far. Kyle Shanahan is a QB whisperer, but O'Connell is far from it. Skull. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get where he's coming from. O'Connell, really hasn't developed a quarterback in his career. It seems to be more comfortable with the veteran quarterbacks, and That's sort of his prerogative, in his job, and we'll see how it goes here this fall. But I do, yeah. I mean, like the quarterback whisperer, quarterback guru thing. At a certain point, you have to develop your own quarterback. I mean, it just kind of is what it is there. And but I mean, on the other hand, and I mean, like his mentor. I've thought about this too, like Sean McVay. When they were with the Rams there. They took Jared Goff in the draft, and then it seemed to be going, some stops and starts, but was, kind of doing okay. And then they sort of abruptly just were like, he ain't the guy, pull the plug. And then the big trade with Detroit, and then everyone gave up, of course, on Goff on the other side, and the trade ended up working out for the Rams in that they won a Super Bowl, right? But on the other side of it, everyone just thought like Jared Goff, like this guy stinks, like that. The Lions had to take him in this trade. And it turns out they found their franchise quarterback through that as well. The scheme, and then those men running that, they have certain demands, they have certain ways of seeing it, right? And but yeah, as far as O'Connell's go, he has been the most comfortable, and the times when his offense has been successful, it's been the more veteran quarterbacks. And we'll see at some point in the future if he can develop a young quarterback. But yeah, it doesn't appear to be the sort of ethos there, as far as that goes. Like there's certain, and he would talk about this beforehand, before it sort of got to the moment of truth, said all the right things, but yeah, that we haven't really seen that play out. There's a certain level of patience and support there that you just have to do especially if you're going to go with a true junior quarterback coming out at 20 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And then right from the start there, you have to exercise some patience there, especially if there was injuries early in the career. And but yeah, he doesn't have a lot of patience for the quarterback position. And maybe if he was sitting here, he would argue, and I think he sort of subtly argued this, of like, guys, the ownership is sort of, they're sort of getting on me about, we gotta get to the playoffs, we gotta win some playoff games. So I think he's thinking, the firing of Kwesi obviously is like a tick thing. I think like there's a difference, of course, like us as fans of the team, and we're going to be fans of the team. We've been fans of the team as long as we've been alive, and we're going to be fans of the team in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, no matter what. There's a difference the way sometimes we think about some decisions, and then guys in the building where it's like, if I don't win X amount this season, 2026, we're all packing up. All of our families are moving out of here. Right? You can see how the equation and some of these different decisions, it can change it, and sort of, some of that different stuff. So that's sort of the environment we're in right now. But yeah, the sort of larger overall point, I think it's true. That we haven't seen that guy develop a quarterback.
I've got two more for you here. First one, Mark Larson says, "Hey, recklessly speculating. Let's say JJ McCarthy requests a trade and the Vikings decide to honor that request. What team would you like to see him go to, realizing that as a super fan, it not only has to be a team that is a good fit, but one that you can stomach somewhat rooting for?"
Mark's going to get me in trouble here. Shout out to Mark. Mark's a good dude. Well, first of all, I don't think McCarthy's going to demand a trade. I don't think that's going to happen. But if the Vikings, if they did end up listening to calls here later this month, like we've mentioned here this week on shows, this is a predetermined outcome. There is no quarterback competition. That's not what is going on here. And so because of that, they can make a decision, and this is where I don't know the direction that the team is going. Are they intending, we want to keep developing McCarthy, we want him standing by and ready to go if anything with this new offensive scheme, and then Kyler, if that doesn't take off? Or are they willing to listen or engage in trade talks later this, because they haven't been to this point, but like later, that part we'll just have to see. But I think like a couple of the teams out there that would make a lot of sense. The Steelers, I think, would make a ton of sense. And hilariously enough, that would put together McCarthy and Aaron Rodgers for a season, which people were pushing for last year here, right? But now in Pittsburgh, that one would make sense in that Rodgers nearing the end.
Yeah.
Also at that age, you're concerned about injuries, et cetera. They do not have a quarterback of the future, et cetera, et cetera. And I think McCarthy would be a fit in that system for his, namesake Mike McCarthy, not namesake, but that sort of system that he runs. They like the velocity and the throwing downfield and trying to hit those windows in that system. And McCarthy has a skill set that you could build around with that. They would be one. Another one, same division. The Ravens I could see because they don't have a lot of quarterback depth. There's guys on that staff that were on the Michigan staff when McCarthy was there. Those would be two that, off the top of my head, that I could think of. The Jets could make some sense too. Our boy Rick Spielman there. They don't have the quarterback of the future. They're just sort of going through with Geno. Could do a thing of, if we get a shot to audition. It's tough because McCarthy wouldn't be going through a camp with one of those teams, right? So it's sort of like right before the season starts. But once you sort of ingratiate into that offense, the Jets could look, and I expect them to do this either way later in the regular season, of trying to give an audition to one of the younger quarterbacks. They spent a middle round pick on Cade Klubnik, the quarterback from Clemson. McCarthy would be a lot more attractive, I think, of an option for this. Of we get a free roll here a little bit here down the stretch to evaluate a young quarterback. Maybe we run into something, but if not, they don't mind if they lose. Right, like teams like the Jets, the Cardinals, some of these different teams, we expect them to be actively attempting to kind of punt games down the stretch there in advance of this amazing 2027 draft. But you could sort of do it both ways, depending on how low the Vikings would sell. That part of it, I don't know. Some of this stuff with the Vikings, with the quarterbacks, I don't really know what's. It's hard to say what the strategy is. Like Kevin O'Connell's done a very unique thing here this summer where he has ticked off the camps of both the Kyler truthers and the JJ truthers. Like nobody's happy, kind of a thing. But we'll just see the way that it plays out.
Hey, like we only got like 2 minutes left here, but last one's coming.
Yeah.
Tubi says 4 years of Kwesi drafts equals 4 starters. 1 draft with Braz, Robbie Brzezinski. KOC and Flo could be 4 by season's end. Never liked that Kwesi. Here's the question. I'm spurring off this one. Is it too early to say that this past draft is better than any draft under the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah regime?
Before any of these guys have even taken a preseason snap, I don't think
we're having this conversation.
I don't think we can kind of put our flag on the moon with that. I will say though, and it being out there, it very promising early. We have to put the big caveat that it's just been a week and
for sure
a week and change of training camp, but there to the other side of it, there a couple of those Kwesi drafts you get out and you look at like some of the day 3 guys and it's like that's it. I knew that one wasn't going to work out. I don't think that one's going to work out. You had some draft picks that were submitted with envelopes where you had already set the envelope on fire, right? And like. At least they were sort of staying with it in this draft. The only pick I didn't love was the very last one, but then you're at the end of the 7th round. Like a lot of these other picks, you could see what they were looking at, whether the scheme fit, whether it's the ceiling. Some of the guys that were higher floor kind of a picks. I like the philosophy of the draft here this past April. So the guys that they were identifying. Now, you do have to say as well, they had more draft equity than they'd had in recent years. That where you could really see that is on day 2, right? Of course, this would also go into Kwesi botching drafts, but this one would be not the submission of picks. This would be the trades in advance that deprived him of a lot of day 2 picks or whatever. The Hawkinson year, and then it was the attempt to trade up in 2024 to get the Dallas Turner pick that sort of deprived a couple of the day 2s there. But the Vikings, they had a whole bunch of ammunition on day 2 in this draft. But beyond having the more draft equity, I did like the picks as they were submitted more, and also here seeing over the past week plus of training camp, those guys look promising and maybe even more promising than. Than you were even thinking initially. You have a lot of good defensive scheme fits there, and it was a defense that needed bodies. And it did seem, we were making the jokes as the draft was happening of, did Brian Flores commandeer the war room? Has Kevin
Everybody
O'Connell
else was
been
locked out of the room?
Yeah, are they all locked out? Like, because it seemed like there for a while through multiple days almost that it was Brian Flores submitting every pick. He's
turning the card.
The league office calls it. Vikings, we need your pick, and Flores is like, yeah, it's me again. This time, let's see here. We'll take that freak linebacker from Cincinnati. I'm going to do some disgusting things with this guy in my scheme.
Oh God, yeah. There was no like central phone in the war room. The number that the league office called for some reason went straight and was patched into Brian Flores' personal cell phone.
100%.
Yeah, hey Raj, it's me again. It's B Flow. Yeah, we're gonna go with another defensive tackle. Yeah. Everybody else thinks that's a great pick. All right, thanks. Bye.
The last third round pick, they're like, put O'Connell the next one. They're like, put O'Connell on the phone. He's like, no, I want to get that kamikaze safety from Miami. Yeah, we'll take Jacoby Thomas.
He's in the bathroom. He had a bad lunch. Like he's let me kind of handle this one. Don't worry about it. But hey, that's gonna do it for this week and today's show. We will be back on Monday though. More Vikings training camp from over the weekend discussion into next week. Pads fully on, speed ramped up, quarterback competition. It's happening. It's happening. I just want somebody to pull away. Like I don't want it to be this guessing game of like, what's O'Connell thinking? Just give us a definitive answer and then we can move on.
Yeah, or what's the point of it if you've already in advance sort of picked so
absolutely.
We'll see that play out as the pads come out here, practice, get more physical. We're going to learn a lot about this team here in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, coming off of a Thursday where we did not practice, a little bit of a shorter episode today. But like I said, Vikings will be back out there at the facility today, Friday, tomorrow, Saturday, and then of course full gamut next week. So we will have all kinds of stuff to talk about. But that's all the time that we have for this week. For AJ, I'm Thor. We'll see you on Monday.